So today we are here for the Spanish Presidency event for Europeana. Our title is Accelerating 3D in the Common European Data Space for Cultural Heritage, Building Capacity for 3D. And I think those three words, accelerating and capacity building, really are the active words in this conference today. We really want to focus on the capacity building aspect, making sure you have the resources and the understanding, the experience you need for your institution, for your specific regional or country circumstances to work on 3D in our new European data space. Now, I can do an introduction, but we have some much more important people that can welcome you today and give you a short introduction to the day. First, we have the Honorable Miquel Iceta, who is the Minister of Culture and Sport, who would like to welcome you today with an online presentation. So here we go. Please run the presentation if you can.
Muy buenos días. Me hubiera encantado estar hoy con vosotros para participar en estas jornadas, pero no ha sido posible. Así que quiero dirigirme a organizadores y asistentes a través de este vídeo. Europeana es un ejemplo de sinergias, de digitalización, de accesibilidad, al haberse convertido en esa gran biblioteca digital europea del patrimonio cultural, alimentada con millones de contribuciones de todos los Estados miembros. Un espacio común para conocer, difundir, disfrutar y también para proteger nuestro rico y diverso patrimonio cultural. España es uno de los países que más contribuye actualmente en número de objetos digitales aportados, lo que pone en evidencia nuestra apuesta por la digitalización, la preservación y la reutilización. Europeana es sin duda una iniciativa emblemática de la Unión Europea que nos une, nos integra, nos vincula. Es el ejemplo de que la cultura es crucial para la construcción de sociedades y ciudadanías mejores y para la salvaguarda de nuestras democracias. Como muchos sabéis ya, la presidencia española del Consejo de la Unión Europea ha colocado la cultura y su patrimonio en el centro de las políticas públicas para abordar los desafíos ecológicos, sociales y digitales de Europa. Entendemos la cultura como un bien público esencial y así ha quedado recogido en la Declaración de Cáceres, un documento que hemos suscrito por unanimidad los 27 Estados miembros en la reciente reunión informal de ministros de Cultura de la Unión Europea que celebramos en Cáceres y que recoge el compromiso unánime de que la cultura sea considerada de ahora en adelante un bien público mundial al más alto nivel político. Los retos a los que se enfrenta Europeana no son menores. Para que cumpla con sus objetivos será crucial el apoyo y el compromiso continuo de todos los Estados miembros, centrando nuestros esfuerzos en la digitalización y la preservación. Siguiendo las recomendaciones de la Comisión Europea, España ha organizado esta conferencia internacional y trabajará para conseguir que en 2030 estén digitalizados en 3D los monumentos y sitios considerados en riesgo que hay en nuestro territorio. España es un orgulloso socio de la campaña Twin, que está recopilando y mostrando ejemplos emblemáticos y de alta calidad de los activos culturales de Europa en 3 dimensiones. Nuestra contribución a la campaña es una pieza única del siglo X, el bote de Zamora, que se encuentra en el Museo Arqueológico Nacional. Esperamos que Twin sea solo el comienzo de un movimiento más amplio y sostenido para aprovechar plenamente el potencial de las tecnologías 3D en beneficio del patrimonio cultural de Europa, los ciudadanos y las instituciones por igual. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Mr. Iceta. So some really interesting messages there as well. This Bota de Zamoras, I am very interested in to see in 3D. Our next welcome keynote is by Ivo Volman. He is the Director of Data at DG Connect at the European Commission, and he also has a pre-recorded message to share with us today.
Good morning. Many thanks for inviting me to say a few words on where we stand with the cultural heritage data space. Now, unfortunately, I cannot be with you physically today, but I'm very happy that I'm able to address you via this video. As you know, digital is one of the priorities of the Commission. And let me start by saying a few words on the digital decade, the overall policy framework for our digital ambitions. With the digital decade, we aim at the digital transformation of businesses and also public administrations. Now, this includes, of course, our sector, museums, libraries, archives, and other cultural heritage institutions. The digital decade has a number of targets, for example, for the uptake of cloud, artificial intelligence, and other advanced technologies, and also for issues such as skills. Now, the first report of progress towards the targets of the digital decade has just been published, with the results on the four main axes: infrastructures, digital transformation of businesses, of public administration, and of digital skills. The conclusions are clear. If we want to meet the 2030 targets, we, the EU and the member states, will have to shift into a higher gear. Some examples. The report shows that by 2030, under the current conditions, only 59% of the population will master basic digital skills, against a target of 80%. And the number of ICT specialists may not exceed 12 million against a target of 20 million people employed for the 2030 target. Now, this is really a wake-up call for all of us to increase our collective efforts in all the different areas. And this brings me to our main policy framework for digital cultural heritage. It's the recommendation on a common European cultural heritage data space. And this recommendation also has a number of targets. Now, we will soon mark 2 years of the recommendation that was published on the 10th of November 2021, and we will be reporting on the outcomes to take stock on the progress we have achieved together. The survey on that is already open for member states to reply so that we can get a full picture of what's happening, and we are eagerly awaiting the final inputs. Now, the objective is to achieve the targets for 2025. Remember, all monuments at risk and 40% of the most visited ones should be digitized. And it's up to you, the member states, to define what is at risk and what is most visited. Now, this is all, of course, about boosting 3D digitization. And for that, we've also set up the Twin It campaign. It's about digitizing a key example in each member state of a very special monument or object. And of course, you're being supported in all the digitization endeavors by Europeana. It's a key player when it comes to capacity building necessary for further 3D digitization. And of course, also then for making the digitized material available as part of a real common European data space for cultural heritage. One very particular aspect of capacity building is getting the technology closer to the human experience. And for that, the recent Commission strategy on virtual worlds, it was published in July, is very, very relevant. Now, the strategy calls on taking the opportunity of this fantastic technological development to bring more immersive experiences to the citizens. And there's also a new call for grants for the data space, which has just been published, that integrates this aspect. And we're really looking forward to the proposals in this respect. We're asking for one 3D model and XR scenario to be implemented by the project, and we will have 4 million euros available for an estimated 4 projects. The info day session on this will be next week. Now, then, before closing, I would like to call your attention to our Ukraine campaign. This is part of a broader initiative called Laptops for Ukraine. Last month, the first 1,000 laptops were delivered already to the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine, and we saw schools and hospitals receiving them. This is also important for cultural heritage because we know that Ukrainian cultural heritage is systematically targeted. And there's a great need to digitize and to catalog the collections and also the monuments. So please, if you've got laptops, storage servers, scanners, cameras that you can spare, they can have a completely new life in a place where they're much needed by our colleagues at this very moment. Okay, after this call for Ukraine, I would like to call on all of you for our joint work. And that is to do everything you can to reach the 2025 targets of the recommendation. Yes, I know that they are challenging these targets, but we need to be ambitious. And in this context, I would also encourage you to complete the Twin-It campaign, and armed with the knowledge gained in that process, to continue digitizing monuments and objects in 3D. So thank you so much for all the great work you have done and the great work we're doing collectively. And I would say, enjoy the conference, and I hope to see you soon in person. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Ivo, for those messages. If you'd like to learn more about Laptops for Ukraine, you can get some more information by Googling it, but also on Europeana pro.europeana.eu to take part in this campaign. Ivo highlighted some other things that we for sure will hear more of later in the day: the Twin-It campaign, the new calls for funding, and of course, what the data space means for Europeana and for your institution as well. So the stage is slowly being set. We have a few more opening welcomes to enjoy. Next up, we have Maria Jose Calvez. She is the General Director for Books and Reading Promotion at the Spanish Ministry of Culture. She's with us in person, and she will give us a warm welcome as well. Please welcome her on stage. Microphone? You need a microphone? Or? Yeah. Thank you, of course.
It's open, yeah. Buenos días a todas y a todos y bienvenidos a Pamplona, bienvenidos a este espacio Baluarte y bienvenidos a esta reunión técnica, porque es una reunión muy técnica, como sabéis, de Europeana, organizada bajo la presidencia española de la Unión Europea por el Ministerio de Cultura y Deporte del Gobierno de España. Esta organización ha sido posible gracias a la colaboración con la Comisión Europea, con la Fundación Europeana y, por supuesto, también con el Gobierno de Navarra, que nos ha acogido. Muchísimas gracias. Gracias también a la presencia de los responsables de distintos niveles de las
heads of different levels from the autonomous communities and the Director General of Aragon, who is also with us today. This space, this data space, which is Europeana, which is common for our cultural heritage, it's not just another initiative by the European Union. It's an essential initiative because it has two fundamental targets. First, to make our cultural heritage available to the whole of the citizenship, and without regardless of where they live or their income level. But not only today, but also citizens of the future. As the minister said in his message, preservation is key in Europeana. Spain has supported this initiative from the start with conviction and with commitment. And they've also pointed out that we're one of the three main contributors to Europeana, with more than 4.6 million objects offered by over 116 Spanish institutions. Of course, I want to say thank you to all the institutions, all the institutions, and of course the National Library of Spain. Many libraries are contributing. Among them, there's the Digital Library of Navarre. Also, we have museums, archives, research center, cultural institutions, departments of municipal, regional governments. They are all contributing so that our heritage, be it bibliographical or physical, is available to everyone. In Spain, this solid ecosystem of knowledge, this network of growth, are supported by Hispana. Hispana is a portal to be able to access the Spanish digital heritage. And this network is crucial, and it'll be crucial in the future to Europeana will be to be able to expand the cultural heritage. The cultural heritage is at the highest level of the Spanish presidency of the European Union, with goals such as advancing in strategic autonomy, advancing in green strategies, and promoting better economic and social justice. For this, the commitment of not only Spain, but the rest of the European Union is key in achieving this common goal. All of you here know the recommendation of the European Commission of 2021, which gives a common cultural space and which encourages all of us who are part of the European Union to intensify, without a doubt, without hesitating, to digitize as quicker, as better, and as sooner as possible to avoid or prevent the loss of any of these, any part of our heritage. And this is where we have technology, information. The 3D technologies offer us opportunities without precedent. This is the goal that we have in the sessions that you're going to have throughout today. We need to take advantage of this technology, to take advantage of these opportunities. We have a multidisciplinary capacity building, exchange of practices, and creation of networks. This conference also aims to intensify the dialogue amongst all of us, to see the visions, the expectations, and to create a shared vision of this 3D capacity. The Spanish presidency of the European Union and Europeana, together we hope that your experience and your knowledge and this need to share will inspire this session and the focus that we might have for this common cultural heritage in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Lovely to have you here in person. And I'm always in awe of how well the translators can follow even Spanish speech and translate it into English. So thank you so much for helping me. No, you weren't fast. I mean, Spanish speakers are fast is what I'm saying in general. Not you specifically, luckily. To set the scene, so now that we have had some welcomes, let's start by diving into some of the more nitty-gritty aspects of Europeana when it comes to 3D, and what this capacity building actually entails for you, your institution, for Europeana, and for the data space as well. And to set that scene for us, we have Laura Guindao. She is the Deputy Director General of Library Coordination at the Ministry of Culture and Sports. And we have Valentine Charles. She is Director of Data Services at Europeana. Please welcome them on stage.
Good morning. Buenos dias. You were expecting maybe Arie Verwaayen, the General Director of the Europeana Foundation, in this very spot today. I have the regret to announce that he's not being able to join us today due to unforeseen circumstances, and I'm very pleased to be with you today for this event. A round of thanks. We have heard already many thanks, but we can't we have to tell more. I would like to begin by thanking the Spanish Presidency of the Council of the EU and the Spanish Ministry of Culture and Sport for making this conference possible, and I have all of you here today with us. In particular, we are grateful to Maria Jose Galvez, General Director for Books and Reading Promotion, for leading our excellent cooperations. Thank you for the Spanish contribution all these years to Europeana. And special thanks to Laura Guindao, Deputy Director General of Library Coordination, and Julio Cordal, Service Head of Digital Project, and their team for their valuable work in preparing this very event. I would like to also thank the government of Navarra to welcome us in this very beautiful venue in the stunning city of Pamplona. And last but not least, we are grateful for the support and the contribution from our partners at the European Commission, in particular Ivo Volman, that you just have heard, Director of Data, DG Connect, for his recorded keynote, and Fulgencio San Martin, Policy Officer of the Digital for Culture Unit, who is joining us in person today. So thank you.
Antes de empezar a introduciros en la conferencia, quería dar las gracias también a Harry Verballen, aunque no esté aquí, y a todo su equipo.
Harry Verballen and all the team, Valentin Sari, the whole team from the Europeana Foundation for having constructed this digital space, which is Europeana, for having created a network with other member states, all of us concerned with culture, with digital culture, and for organizing this event. Well, Spain, as both the minister and Maria Jose have said, we have been cooperating since 2005 with Europeana, because in Spain and 5 other member states told the European Commission that we needed to have a project, a parallel project to what Google Library had, and from that we created Europeana. We have been cooperating from the beginning, and always both the Ministry of Culture, the National Library of Spain, they have always been there. And as Maria Jose said, we're some of the countries that most digital objects contribute to Europeana. We are also very interested in continuing to digitize and preserve. And along these days, we wanted to bring some Spanish examples of best practices. One of them is the National Library, with all the examples of reutilization and repurposing of the cultural heritage, and Jabol also, who are digitizing in 3D. Maybe their best practices can illuminate all of us. As Maria Jose had said, the recommendation for the cultural data space has been very important, very relevant. It's been a turning point for all member states. One of the reasons is that we were interested in digitizing in 3D. Up to now, we had some cases in all member states, but there hadn't been this great digitization or digitalization in 3D. And this is why we're here, trying to see how we can all push in a particular space, and also the creation of this cultural space, common cultural space, which has its basis in Europeana, and which is truly a change. This data space symbolizes these willingness that we have of creating this platform where we can all share our cultural patrimony, our cultural heritage, sorry. But it's not only going to be that, it's going to be something much bigger. It's going to interconnect with other European spaces, such as medicine, engineering. So it's going to be much larger. And all the steps that we take are going to help us to improve this this digital Europe, where we are advancing, where information flows without effort, is interconnected, and helps an increasingly greater innovation. All of us who are here and people from other member states, each one of us, we are the guardians of our own cultural heritage, and we all need the key to be able to create that common space in a database which is harmonized, and align all our data policies so that this can be possible. By creating this common data space, not only are we going to improve academic research, but it's actually going to help for digital tourism, so that we can use it for education, for the creation of video games, or even for producers of films and television series. The new technological companies are going to be able to create augmented reality tools and have an analysis of all these data in these spaces. Our cultural heritage is not only in physical archives anymore, thanks to initiatives such as Europeana, but we continue advancing along this cultural data space, and we're going to, and with new improvements such as the new digitation, 3D digitation. So preservation, digitation, and the celebration of all this depends on the cooperation among all of us, so that our past histories can serve or illuminate our common future. Now, Valentin is going to speak a little bit more about 3D.
So the focus of today's conference is 3D. So why 3D is important for our sector? 3D can really equip our sector to better respond to today's challenges, from the climate crisis to changes in our social fabric, and to the most recent wave of digital revolution, which is transforming all aspects of our lives. Europe has expressed a bold ambition to master these changes into a concerted way. We speak about the holistic triple transformation, where social, green, and digital are interconnected dimensions. For our sector to stay relevant, we must act as drivers and enablers of this triple transformation. The potential of 3D for the triple transformation have been, in fact, recognized in the European Commission's recommendation of 2021, which has been already mentioned a lot. So practically, how 3D can support those ambitions? 3D can support a more inclusive and diverse and democratic heritage sector by reaching wider and more diversified audiences, for example, by addressing people with impairments. 3D technology can support climate adaptation and mitigation by allowing non-destructive analysis for conservation, restoration, and reconstruction of heritage at risk. And yet, to fully leverage the potential of 3D, we also must make it a human-centered and value-based approach. We must make sure that tech works for us and not the other way around. The Twin It campaign, the Twin It 3D for Europe's culture campaign aims to advance this vision. Twin It is a collaborative effort by the European Commission and the Europeana initiative under the auspices of the Swedish presidency that happened last April, the Spanish presidencies of the Council of the EU, and culminating with the Belgium presidency next year. Together, we are calling on the EU Ministries of Culture to digitize at least one 3D heritage assets and submit it to the data space. Twin It is at the moment in full swing. As you have heard from the Spanish minister, Spain has submitted its contribution, and we are very excited to see all those digital assets coming our way. These encompass the very richness of Europe's heritage, from the scientific, architectural, artistic, and archaeological heritage of Europe. Throughout the day, you will get a preview of the type of heritage assets that have been so far selected and that will form the Twin It 3D Pan-European collection. So why this meeting today is important? We hope the Twin It campaign will only be the beginning of a wider sustained uptake of 3D in our sector. For this, we need to continue fostering multidisciplinary capacity building for heritage professional, exchange of practice at European level, and networking, which is what we are going to do today. This conference aims at fostering a much needed dialogue on 3D capacity building for our sector, identifying opportunities and challenges, align visions and expectations, and form a shared understanding of capacity building for 3D for the data space and beyond. We hope that today will inspire you, provide you with new insights and approaches that can inform future conversation and also give a policy direction. I wish you an inspiring and engaging conference. I hope you will enjoy the program we have set up for you today. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you both, Laura and Valentin. So we heard about Twin It. I feel like we should hear about it just a little more, especially in connection with the recommendation from the European Commission on 3D digitization. The Twin It campaign asks everyone to every country to provide one object to Europeana. The recommendation of the European Commission is, of course, very ambitious and has very high targets. We hope that this Twin It campaign can be a kind of start, a push in the right direction to help different countries contribute to this recommendation for the European Commission. To talk much more about the European Commission's recommendation and about the Twin It campaign, I would like to invite Valentin back on stage in a second. And we also have Fulgencio San Martin, who we've been working together with at Europeana for a long time. He's a policy officer at the European Commission, and he knows everything you would like to know and more about the European Commission's recommendation. So let's welcome them on stage. Maybe do this. There we go. So, Fulgen, if you'd like to introduce this recommendation to us, that would be lovely.
So for starters, I would like to set up the context in which we started. We wrote this recommendation. We are talking about 2019, when it seems like many years ago, when suddenly in the news, we saw that Notre Dame in Paris was on fire. You may remember that. It seems like it was a century ago, but it was just 4 years ago. Then we were all worried about the cultural heritage that was at risk, and we wanted to save it. We wanted to digitize, we wanted to re-digitize, because actually Notre Dame had been 3D digitized some months ago, some months before the fire, and we were very worried. That was our main idea for the recommendation. Then 1 year after the fire, we had something even worse. We had the pandemics. And many people were dying all around the world, and also we had this hard confinement, and we couldn't visit the monuments, we couldn't visit the museums, and we were all looking like frantically for the websites that we love to visit. And they are the most visited places, was another of our main points or main categories for the recommendation. So that was at risk and most visited. The idea behind most visited was also not only because when the confinement was over and we could reopen and go again to the museums, they were the most impacted, but also they were the closest to our hearts. So it made sense that we were digitizing them first rather than others. Also because if they are the most visited, they are supposed to be the most reused, or so we thought. Well, the third category in the recommendation was, or is, the underrepresented. So the cultural heritage that usually is not digitized. And there we were thinking on, for example, intangible cultural heritage. We haven't discussed about that. There we are not talking about monuments or objects, but rather other things like dances, cuisine, or other intangible cultural heritage. Now, then we launched, after a year, in 2021, we launched the recommendation, and we set very high, very ambitious targets, as Ivo said before. And we know we are ambitious, but we must be ambitious, because in any case, we would be either criticized or not, or whatever, but we must be ambitious, because, I mean, Notre Dame, the roof is over, the central tower is no more, probably will not be reconstructed, and Notre Dame is still closed, if I'm not wrong. Venice is flooding every year, and is not getting any better. Still, they are mitigating it with just not allowing the cruises and so on. And there are the earthquakes in Italy, and there is the war in Ukraine, the terrible war, and another war in Middle East. And the cultural heritage is suffering from that. And there we need to digitize, because we must do it now, not only for us, as Laura said, not only for us, Laura and Maria Jose, but also for the future. we are doing it for the future. So the survey was published in November, as they said, and in 3 weeks, it will be 2 years. And there we will need to do the survey. This is the screen capture of the survey. And what we are looking for, we know that we are a bit behind in the targets, but for that we have 2 explanations. The first one is that the recommendation had a very key point that we haven't mentioned so far, which is the national digitization strategy, or the digital national strategy, as you want. With that, we want the member states to have a very clear strategy of what they mean, what they understand as at risk. Because at risk in Italy, in Venice, in the Abruzzi, or in Spain, or in Ukraine is not the same. So it must be defined by every member state. The Commission is nowhere to define that for the member states. So the national strategy should clearly define those. So we will be publishing a report with the results of this survey. And yeah, we will hear from that soon. That's it.
Lovely, thank you. Yes, we give the clicker to Valentin. Valentin, maybe you could set the stage a bit more on exactly the context for the Twin It campaign.
Yeah. So the idea, Philgen presented the recommendation. So the idea is to tell you that you are not alone in this endeavor, and Europeana Foundation, together with 18 consortium partner and the other partners of the Europeana initiative, is deploying the common European data space for cultural heritage. And as part of deploying the data space, we have several actions that are meant to help you in reaching those targets. We see 3D as, we consider 3D in a very holistic way, so we don't only want to focus on the technical aspects, which sometimes is the tendency we have, but also to consider 3D as part of the standards, the guidelines we need to expand and develop to support you, and also all the capacity building efforts we need to deploy, so, such as events like this one, but also training. So as I said, the Twin It campaign is the motor to make the action on 3D to start, and underlying this there is all the work we do in the data space around the different points I have already mentioned. So for example, we are developing as part of our knowledge base some specific documentation on 3D. So if you are already a contributor to Europeana, you can see here further explanation on how the practices you have already followed in submitting other type of material, what do you need to do in addition or slightly differently when it comes to 3D. We are also deploying a series of webinars targeted to the member states and the Twin It contact point. So between now and the end of the year, there are several workshops that you can join that will lead you throughout the whole 3D process. Those workshops are organized by our partner 4CH, which is the competence center for 3D. Roberto will speak about this a bit later this afternoon. So this is our overall timeline. So as you can see, we are in October at the Spanish Presidency event. So there was already several deadlines that are behind us. The fact that every member states were asked to provide us with a contact point, and then by the end of September, start identifying the assets they would like to contribute to the campaign. So today, as I said already in my opening, today you will see already some examples of the assets that are going to be provided. And then between now and February next year, the idea is to prepare the material. So not only preparing the 3D model, but also prepare the metadata going with it before they get submitted to Europeana in the data space. So the next steps. So as I said, now we are entering in phase 2 of the campaign, which is really the active work on working on the 3D model for those assets, and also working on the documentations that goes with it. We are also going to deploy other smaller campaigns to also include partners that may not have 3D at the moment, but institutions that are interested in also contributing content, we are going to try to source 2D content in relation to those objects. So Spain, for example, selected the Bote de Zamora. So if in your collections you have documents that are referring to this object or depicting this object, we will source this content so that it can come and enrich this collection we are building through Twinit. And yeah, we will also continue our communication efforts. So yeah, in a nutshell, that was a bit leading you through the different activities that are there to help you. And of course, if you have specific needs, more questions, we're happy to take them on board. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. This was a very clear overview. Thank you. This was a very clear overview. Already we've seen the timeline of how Twinit will progress. We're in phase 2 already, and it's lovely to see that there already are a bunch of capacity building resources for institutions to look at, like the webinars that are there in the knowledge base that we're building. I want to look a little bit more in the future, and maybe that's a good question for Fulgen. When it comes to long-term preservation of 3D heritage and 3D digitization, how would you suggest how do you suggest that these member states and institutions approach the long-term planning when they're setting a strategy for 3D digitization, which a lot of institutions are working on currently?
Yeah. So in order to affront that, we must think a bit ahead. So what will be like these 3D models in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years? So how they will be used in 15 years? I have no crystal ball to know what the world will be like in 15 years, but I can tell you something. Probably it will not be with something like this. So how? Well, that is a question that usually is asked, at least by themselves. It's wondered by the archivists. So whenever they archive information in whichever form, even digital information, they must think how this information will be used in the future. So in this case, I would say stick to the standards and documents. So what are the standards? What are the tools that you have today? The tools that you have today are the knowledge base that Valentin just showed you. There are the publishing framework with 3D that is coming. Those are the standards. There are international standards. There are the webinars by the Competence Center of Cultural Heritage that Valentin just mentioned that are ongoing, and probably after they are done, because they are for member states, they will be published and released. What else? There is the 3D study that we published at the Commission. If you don't find it, ask me. I will be happy to send you the link. There is the e-archiving long-term preservation. They are delivering a specification, particularly for cultural heritage, very, very soon. And can you
want this
next? Yeah, this. And there is this afternoon, there is this workshop by the colleagues of Giravolt of Catalonia, where they will show you how to digitize in 3D. And I would like to show this. I'm sorry, Albert, but these are the examples of the errors that they have not really committed, but the problems that they have faced during many years because they have been digitizing in 3D since that. In 1992, there was no internet, or barely any internet, at least not in Spain. So what problems they had during the years? So they have had problems with hardware, the hardware that is not updated. So the digitization was depending on the hardware. The second was that there was no documentation. So they cannot be reused, they cannot be migrated, they cannot be taken in any way. The third was very recent, and it was a wonderful example of extended reality and what we call nowadays the metaverse, even the virtual worlds communication that we published some months ago. But unfortunately, it cannot be reused fully, even if it was recent, because it was done with a software that has like 40 new versions, 40 new versions. And then many of the features that were available in 2017 are not available anymore. And since they were not migrated, they were lost. Lesson learned, document, migrate often. And for both, you need a national digital strategy, which says how much and how far you need to document and how far and how often you need to migrate. That is my conclusion for long-term preservation.
That's crystal clear. Yeah, having a 3D strategy is paramount,
Yeah.
clearly. A question for both of you, maybe, and if there are questions in the room, please, or online, please keep hold of them. We will open the floor for questions in a little bit. There often seems to be a bit of tension between wanting to digitize as much as possible, as many objects as possible, but this takes a lot of time and a lot of resources. So it seems that experts often have to choose between digitizing a lot, but maybe in lower quality and with more errors, more challenges, or focusing a lot of effort on a small amount of objects or sites or monuments. So how would both of you kind of advise how to achieve this balance between quality and quantity as well? And maybe Valentina, you can answer this first.
Yeah, so yeah, when you need to make a 3D model, it looks like an enormous task, and there is a whole workflow you need to go through. So I think the idea is to identify what is the crucial, what is the moment in this workflow you should focus on. And I'm not a 3D expert, but I think one of the key moment is really when you start capturing the objects you want to 3D to make a 3D model of. So let's say if you adopting for a technology where you have to take many pictures, you have to focus on this part, because if you have good picture and if they are properly stored, we also are at the moment we are mastering quite well every standards around picture, then you can make any 3D model you want. Because in terms of 3D model, there is a huge range of type of models you could use, because depending on how you want to reuse those models, the quality you will need will be different. So at the end of the day, if the model you want is, the idea is to maybe set up a workshop with people with visual impairments, you don't need something that is very granular with all the details, because what you want is to have the shape of the assets and maybe the most crucial feature. So yeah, you need a specific model for this. But on the other hand, if you are you want to open a new exhibition in your museum and you need you want to develop an experience with a table and a 3D model of a site, you need much finer details, and for this you need a much more complex 3D model that will require more data, but also will cost you more. So there is this idea that you need to really identify what is the usage you want to do on this model, and also to make sure that when you are conceiving the 3D model, you make sure that you have the picture that can help you to fulfill all those use cases, but not necessarily have 3D model corresponding to all those use cases. So you can build in a very iterative process where one time you can build a model that is really simple, and then using the same source, you can build something later that is much more complex, because at that moment you have more funding or you have more time to do it. And the same happens for the metadata that should not be forgotten, because a 3D model without documentation is useless. So we need to think about all those metadata you need to create to accompany this model. And the same this same iterative process can be also achieved for metadata, where for a specific use case, you need specific metadata, a range of metadata. And then later, if you come towards a new use case, you can iteratively enrich the metadata progressively. So this is to tell you that if the task of making a 3D model seems very huge, there is ways to iteratively build on this. So you don't have to aim for the highest, more complex, more costly 3D model, but you need to think about what you want to build first and make sure that you can iteratively progress on this. and not have to redo some process. So if you had a perfect image capturing process, for example, you don't need to redo this, it's done, then you can really just build on it. So yeah, I'm looking at Albert, maybe the expert will have something else to say on the topic, but that's a bit my take on it.
Thank you, Fulgen.
Yeah, I really don't have much to say about this. The experts are here, and you will hear later from Albert and Roberto. Thing is that I had some discourse prepared, saying that you must digitize at the highest quality possible, because then from there you can extract a lower version, a lower quality version, and you will always have the highest quality for whatever other purpose. And that we have had with many examples. You have it when you take pictures with your camera or with your phone. So you take the highest quality, actually you don't even care about that, and then you share it in social media, and in social media it goes a very low quality of it, which is a migration of the original image. But then if you want to print it, which one do you print? The lower quality or the original one? If you go with the lower quality, you will see the disaster very, very quickly, and you will have to do it twice. Thing is, highest quality, but actually Roberto was telling me that depending on the purpose, the type of the acquiring, the type of digitization can be different. So there is this delicate balance that we were talking at the beginning. Like Valentin, I am no expert in 3D, so I can only tell you that to be thinking always, there is this point of view that I like a lot. We are digitizing 3D because of preservation and reuse. Reuse is more or less immediate. No, we are thinking about it. Maybe it will be used in a video game. Maybe it will be used in some other creative or social media or immediately. But long-term preservation is for the future. So when you are digitizing, when you are documenting, think always like this. You will not be there in 10 years, in 15 years. Not, I mean, you will be there. You will be alive, hopefully, so will I. But your team, you and your team will not be working anymore in that department. So think about that. You are writing for the person who will take over from you. And if you don't have the opportunity to hand over that work, how would you explain? And the explanation will be much different than if you are explaining to yourself in 15 years. You see where I'm going? That is how an archivist works. And that is exactly what you would need to think when digitizing. That's it.
Thank you. A bit of an ominous message, but I think I understand the meaning behind it. Yeah. So define your use cases, make sure that you iterate. Don't forget the metadata, I think, is also an important message. And if you digitize in the highest quality, you already have a lot of use cases that you can take from that, because you can extract different pieces of quality from your first digitization.
Document if, like if you are going to hand over and you are not there to provide support.
Make sure to document so that the people, when your next colleague comes in, they don't stand in front of something they have no idea how it works. Lovely. Do we have any questions in the room that you want to ask to either Fulgen or Valentin or both? If not, giving you a second to ruminate on your questions. We have some questions from online that I would like to pose to you. So this is a question for Fulgen, but maybe Valentin, you can chip in here as well. Online, the people thank you for your really interesting presentations. One of the key questions are, and you already kind of pointed towards it, how are we going to access these 3D objects in the future? Will 3D objects be stored in one centralized location, organized by the European Union? Will everyone have their own way to host their 3D objects? Of course, we know that these objects are often quite large, so there's a lot of costs that go with those. Do we have any, I guess, inklings or ideas of what the future of 3D preservation looks like? Fulgen, maybe you can answer first.
So first and foremost, Europeana is not a database, unlike what many people think. Europeana is an aggregation of links, and the data belongs to the museums and to the owners. And that was like that since the beginning. As Laura said, in 2005, it was very clear. The commission was commissioned by the member states. We are here because at the request of the member states to aggregate the culture of the whole union to put it together. So the 3D objects, in principle, they will rely on the museums, they will stay in the member states, and Europeana will have links to them. Roberto was telling me this morning that the way that the visualization tool that they are preparing for the Twin-It campaign in Inception, in the Inception project, will work something like Microsoft Word with links, or if you want, like Google Maps. When you access Google Maps, you are not accessing the whole maps of the whole place that you are willing to. You are accessing the whole world. And then when you zoom, you get only the data for which you are zooming to. It would be the same with 3D. So you are getting the general picture, so a very general model. So that is an extraction of a lower quality from the original model. And then when you zoom to a particular part, so for example, for a tower in a church, or for a particular arm in a sculpture in an object, etc., then you are downloading only that part to see what are the details, what are the colors, what are the mechanisms, if any, that are inside. And that is a very nice way of doing it. The thing is that we are at the beginning of these technologies, of these advanced technologies. We don't know yet how they will behave in the future. They are definitely not industrial and very well-known standards. We are working on them. We are setting them up, and we are setting them up at the same time that we are digitizing, which makes it even more challenging. I don't want to name the industry standard that is in the US, China now, that we are all thinking about 3D, but we cannot rely on a private company that is not in the European Union. Commissioner Breton, one of the reasons to put in place the data spaces, Commissioner Breton said that we needed to be independent. We needed to be on our own. And that happens first when he took over as a commissioner, and he went to the factories in I think it was in April 2020 with the vaccines, because we were not producing the vaccines in the territory of the Union. We were producing them in Oxford or in the US. And then the European Union was at the mercy of other external actors. It was already the Brexit. So that 3D, we must be our own boss. We must set up our own rules. Follow, of course, the standards, but that is what is ongoing right now.
Thank you. Yeah, following the standards and making sure we have this sovereignty over our data on EU soil.
That's the word that I was looking for. Thank you.
Valentin, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, also because I see we need to kind of wrap up. Yeah, today we are not so much speaking about the data space, but Europeana as the steward of the data space, I think it's what we want to achieve. So there are things that Europeana will not necessarily do, but in the context of the data space, the idea is to find actors and actors that can help in different areas to provide support for the sector. So whether it's in terms of 3D storage or technology. So the idea is to mobilize actors that are better skilled to do to support some actions and to work together on an open, sovereign, independent governance, so that everybody within the data space can benefit from this technology, so that we avoid the monopoly of some technology, of the platformization of some other platform we have. So I think that can be the role of the data space.
Exactly. Yeah. Going against this platformization and making sure that we have the data in hand will be a big challenge when it comes to 3D, but something that I'm sure that we're ready to take on. Right. I think we have run out of time, I'm afraid, but this was a very inspiring discussion. Thank you both. Let's give them a warm hand. And thank you. So lots to think about. I have a million more questions, but if you have questions as well, for sure, you can approach either Fulgen or Valentin. I'm sorry, we don't have time for more questions in this session, but they won't run away during our break and during our coffee. They will be happy to answer your questions as well. So we've heard a lot about Twinit already. We're in phase 2. We have a timeline ready. A few deadlines have passed. So there are a lot of countries that are already very actively working on providing their object or objects to Europeana. And to show that commitment from several countries, we've invited some Twinit contacts from different member states. Oh, here we go. No. Lots of slides to go through. There we go. Some Twinit contacts and representatives of different member states to share with us how they have been working on their Twinit object, on their capacity building, and on providing that digitized 3D object to Europeana. So we're going to go into a panel discussion as well. Again, if you have any questions during these presentations, keep hold of them and we'll make sure to get to them during the Q&A. So I'd like to invite Agata Krawczyk from the Polish Ministry of Culture on stage, Jelena Rubic from the Croatian Ministry of Culture, and our Twinit contact, Martin Ure from the Austrian Ministry of Culture, and our Austrian Twinit contact, and Valentin Scharle once again. Please welcome them on stage.
Yes, so before we give the floor to our panelists, I just wanted to remind everyone again on the objective of the Twinit campaign. So the call for action is quite simple. So every EU member state is called to submit one 3D model for heritage assets. And this asset should belong to one of those 3 categories. So the submitted digitized asset should fall under one of those 3 categories. So assets that are deemed at risk, assets that are the most physically visited, and categories of cultural heritage with a low level of digitization. So let me come back just on a few of those criteria so that we all understand what we are talking about. So for all these categories, the idea is that member states should define what those category means for them in a national context. So the idea is to refer you back to your national digital strategy or your digital preservation goals. But in general, a heritage at risk is an asset that can be at risk in many ways. So you have to consider risk from either resulting from unintended or deliberate humane activity. So this consider a risk, or a natural hazard. Those are the type of risk that comes to mind more directly. And also in terms of risk, this risk can either be a sudden risk. So something happened and now we need to take actions like the fire in Notre Dame, but it can be also the result of a slow decay. So there are monuments and sites where we know there is a decay happening. It's quite slow, but we know it's happening. So maybe we need to take an action now before waiting too long. For example, I'm thinking about in Spain, you have beautiful grottos with paintings inside, and we know that they are disappearing step by step. It is slow, but we know ultimately we won't be able to see them. And then maybe the last clarification is about the category of heritage assets with low level of digitization. So what is meant there? We know that so far the digitization campaign have focused on some type of assets or some type of monument and sites. So the idea is to also identify the gaps in your national strategy. What are the type of cultural heritage that has not been digitized a lot so far, whether they are movable objects or monuments or sites. So yeah, this was to give you the context we are operating in, and you will see in a minute how our panelists have thought about this in their selection process.
Thanks, Valentin. Thank you, the 3 of you, for being here and sharing the experience that you've gone through over the past months, which I'm sure had a lot of challenges and were very interesting to see what objects that you selected. I'd like to start with Martin. You're from the Austrian Ministry. Could you maybe share with us how this process has gone for you? And do you have any slides?
I have a slide, yeah.
Yes, then I will give you this.
Buenos dias, everybody. Hello. The slides start with Poland.
The slides start with Poland, then that is my mistake.
I can put it forward.
Sure. There we go.
That's Austria. We started to think about it in Austria to make a contact point in the ministry. That's me. And then we think about how we could best reach the institutions. So we started a call for proposals, and I want to especially say to it, we have a possibility of a special funding if it needed for the object. Then we have at the end of over the summer, we made the call, and in September we have 4 projects submitted. And then we have a curator of the Albertina Museum who made a review of the objects and the ranking. And at last, of course, we have the final decision by the Secretary of State. And it reached me yesterday, what object we choose. And as you see, we have 4 objects. One is a wooden house in Carinthia. Then one of my favorite, a puppet house and a written desk. And I think I have to say that for me, these are 2 very good objects because in reality, in the museum, you can't touch them and you don't see the full function of it. So the written desk in 3D, it would be possible to open it. And when you open it, there is the special of this wooden art, a music starts to play. And that are things you only can see in 3D, I think. At the end, our finalist and our asset is the last one, the Heiden Tor in Carnuntum. It's an ancient monument from the Romans on the northeastern Limes. And it's also part of the Danube Limes. It's a World Heritage, UNESCO World Heritage site. And near to it, there is the Carnuntum city. It's a Roman ancient city, which is one of the most visited sites in Austria. So it's one criteria. And the other criteria from the TwinIt campaign is it's at very low digitization at the moment. Interesting in this object, I think you need often a story of an object to bring it to the people. And the meaning of this monument changes over the times. Sometimes it's a victory sign. 100 to 200 years later, it's a tomb. And another 200 years later, it's a meeting point for the military. So it's interesting to see how it changes. And with the 3D, I think we can tell these stories. And it's also a part, as said, of the Danube Limes. And this is a project together with Hungary, Slovakia, and Germany. So for us, it shows the European level of our cultural heritage. So the last one is our asset.
Lovely, thank you. How you highlighted the need for a narrative around a 3D object and not just the object for the object's sake, I think is really important. Let's rewind the slides back to Poland.
Back to Poland.
Agata, thank you as well for being here. Could you share your experience of the TwinIt in Poland with us?
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to present our experience with TwinIt campaign. So at first, thanks to very complex guidance from European Commission, we appointed TwinIT contact in our ministry, and this is my friend from my digital culture team, who managed to connect small crowd of heritage professionals from our Ministry of Culture, Center of Competences in the area of digitization. We looked through our databases and we made some research, and we knew that we need to send a formal invitation to institution, museum, national museums, and National Institute of Cultural Heritage with invitation to participate in the campaign. We decided to send invitation to 4 institutions who are very active in the area of 3D techniques in digitization. We also asked for some help and ideas from National Institute for Museums. And as you can see, we received 11 objects. Those are propositions from our national museums, national maritime museums, and Center of Competences, and they were really interesting. So we had some hot discussion what to do with them. So as you can see, there are big objects, churches, but also small monuments, and very interesting details like, for example, barrel of Polish gun or tobacco or teapot, which is example of rare example of Saxon porcelain. And also, as you can see, there are very different objects, not only one kind of them. And one of the object was very interesting for us, which is a main gate to Wilanów Palace. Unfortunately, it was already digitized, so we couldn't use it. So after discussion, we have 11 propositions. So with factors like low level of digitization and the tourism factor, or powerful representation of some art, architecture, and but for us, what was most important that we knew that we were looking for the object with no 3D model, without 3D model. So after discussion, after using categories from recommendation, we decided that for us that will be Collegiate Church of St. Martin the Bishop in Opatów. With approval of our Secretary of State, we decided to choose the object which is in a small town in Świętokrzyskie region. The region has quite a low level of digitization. We knew it from our grant programs, among others, and the church is really beautiful example of Romanesque architecture and one of the best preserved 12th century basilicas in Poland. So we knew that that will be very good example for our campaign. The church houses valuable examples of works of art from Gothic, Renaissance, and Baroque period, and it also is a special place, special significance as a place association with the deliberation of the local assembly in old times. The stone Romanesque temple has retained its architectural form to this day. The Opatów privilege, which is the document of a king's privilege granted to the town inside the building, was decorated by the outstanding painter Stanisław Samostrzelnik, and it's a very valuable example of the miniature art of the Renaissance in Poland. The history of Opatów Church itself is closely connected with is founder, Krzysztof Szydłowiecki. And in his time, he was really powerful figure in Poland. He was famous for his aesthetic taste and oratical talent. And what can we say? The Erasmus from Rotterdam, Dutch humanist who was the greatest scholar of the Northern Renaissance, has dedicated Krzysztof Szydłowiecki one of his special work, which is called Treatise on Language for Krzysztof Szydłowiecki. The interior design in the church has also artistic importance. It houses outstanding examples of Renaissance sculptures like tombstones made by Bernardino Zanobi de Giannocis from Krakow, Giovanni Cini from Siena, and maybe Bartłomiej Berecci. So for us, the choice was quite obvious. We choose the object which never had digital representation, especially in 3D techniques. There are only photographic documentation of the monument. Opatów is a town frequented by tourists who enjoy wandering in the trail of Romanesque buildings. The collegiate church in Opatów, that they can see in Opatów, is one of the most valuable gems of medieval architecture in Poland. So this is our choice. And what I wanted to add also is that we didn't expect that we will receive 11 objects with such a high artistic value. So for us, some extra factor is that now we are wondering what to do with those propositions. We are in the middle of the process, but I hope that we will find some solution and we will start collaboration with that institution in different format except the twinning campaign. So for us, with the guidance from European Commission and the active work of our heritage sector, it was very fruitful process. Thank you.
Thank you, Agata. Now, last but certainly not least, we have Croatia. Jelena, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to hearing your experience with the Twin It campaign.
Okay, thank you. My experience is a little bit different. It's really nice to hear both of you, and it's really nice to be here and share this experience with you. Actually, we didn't have real selection process for the object what we would like to send it. We just knew it. But the process is taking for a really long time. It's like a 3 years process for preparation. What to send as a twinit, and this 3 years work and 3-year communication really communicate through the national project e-culture with the Cultural Heritage Institution, with Cultural Heritage Society. The communication was the key element of, technology is really important, but that communication is even more important in this process, especially for 3D. So we find the partners in the project. It was really an institution with a high capacity for digitalization generally, and then for 3D, and high expertise, and a really good communication challenge to different cultural heritage society. So it was the Museum of Art and Craft for museum community, National University Library in Zagreb for all library community, National State Archive for archive community, and Croatian Radio Television for audiovisual community. And of course, with all the expertise and the recommendation, we made the National Plan for Digitalization of Cultural Heritage that includes for a chapter or few chapter and few recommendations, especially for 3D. So we did start Digitalist 3D, but it's interesting that we also, it was a hard work. It's like was 2 years work. So we involve lots of documents. We involve really laws, regulation on museum, on archives, library, copyright issues, regulation on state infrastructure, because when it's 3D, it's really important to use the right infrastructure for a permanent record of data. And of course, Commission recommendation, especially annex from 21st with that target, what we need to fulfill. And the number seems that we are really at the beginning, but we are trying really hard to reach this to 2030. It was a lot of work. And when the Twinit campaign came into the play, we was just new it, and we really welcome campaign. It was the castle. It's in Istria. It's on a protected geoportal. It's a protected heritage. It's a part of our national geoportal of cultural heritage. So it's connection of maybe more project in one. Also, there was a reconstruction going on, really deep reconstruction of physical object. And it was also during the till 2020, it's finished 2020, but it didn't include 3D. And it was also like funded by European Commission project. And the e-culture project, it's also funded by partly by European Commission. So it was like showing the result from a two separate project or using, and it was like the presentation of two results of the two project. It's really a touristic one, and maybe the result can even find some more, open some new projects, because the first, the castle is really historically rich. The history is from 12 centuries, and it's still, it's some new research, it's some new information coming. So it really can connect to different story, to different time period, to different public, to the citizen, to the researchers. And it's also make the ruler, the lots of rulers were involved also. And the archive, it's full of information, like the oldest information is done in an archive, but also there is a lot of information in the museums around that. So the data are really good covered. There is really richness of data, and there is really high quality data. And maybe it can open some new connection between the archives and the museum and the libraries. So it was part of the selecting process that the result of it can be reused and can be further developed. And it's also important for local community. There is a game like make your own castle rota. And it's really nice for, I mean, actually it's attraction and for grown-ups and for kids, how to make it. So it's really popular. And there is a low level of 3D digitalization of building like that in Croatia, especially for presentation, maybe for research or documentation, but for a presentation slow. So that was one. Again, when the Twinit, when we find out about the Twinit, we just knew that Castle Rota is a selection. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yelena. We have time for maybe one question from the room, if there is any. Otherwise, I will ask you to maybe give a closing remark, maybe with some recommendations for other member states that might not be as far in the process as you are, or have some challenges that they're facing that are similar to yours. Yelena, if I could ask you for your closing remark before we go to the break.
Me?
Yes,
oh,
please,
yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I know it's nice to share this, but I think that this is a really positive project on a European level, and it is really important to do it together, as we heard before, like how important is to have the single European data infrastructure for 3D cultural heritage. So I don't know if I do you have some advice? But it will really be nice to all member states just relax and enjoy working together.
Lovely, relax and enjoy. Agata?
Or maybe not it's recommendation, but it's rather I rather agree with you, Jelena, that it's important to keep in touch with the whole heritage sector and to hear about their needs. For example, for us, one of really interesting factor is for why digitize that object, why not that church was weather in Poland, because actually one of the institutions told us that, sorry, we cannot do that in December because it will be snowing, there will be bad light. So sorry, but we won't participate in your campaign. So that's why I'm talking about communication. That was my experience.
Communication and keep the weather in mind.
Especially in Poland.
Especially in Poland.
Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, I see also the communication, because as I say, we make a call for proposals. We send out a newsletter to 400 institutions in Austria, and we have 4 submissions. So that said to me, we have to work on the communication. Also, my feedback from some institutions is they are working on the basic work in digitization to make the inventory lists. They are not as far, but we have to support them and show them that it's not too difficult. It's not so difficult, the 3D, as for 20 years ago. So you have more possibilities now, and it's good to have a campaign like this to bring the 3D theme forward.
Lovely. Let's give one last thanks to Martin, Jelena, and Agata. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you. It's 10:30. Our minds are full of 3D knowledge and questions, I'm sure. So I think it's a perfect time for a 15-minute break. Coffee and tea is outside, and we will convene here again at 10:45. See you then. Hello again. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us once again. I hope you had a nice break. I hope you found the speakers that you were looking for and wanted to ask all of your questions for, and that you are now refreshed to talk about some more of the nitty-gritty when it comes to 3D in the Europeana or in the European data space for cultural heritage and in digitization for cultural heritage in general. So when it comes to copyright and copyright law, this is a nuanced and evolving field of law, which is very important to be aware of and to think about when you are working with your 3D digitization colleagues and in your process. So to demystify everything that lies around copyright and IP, we have Ariadna Matas, who is our policy advisor at Europeana, who will give a bit of context when it comes to copyright in 3D. And then we have Antonella Fresa and Kate Fernie, who are joining us online and who will give us some specific use cases on how they dealt with copyright challenges and issues in their 3D digitization. We'll also hopefully have some time for questions afterwards. So yet again, keep hold of those questions, and I will look forward to asking them for you at the end of this panel. So let's welcome Ariadna Matas to the stage. Next slides.
Okay.
There you go.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for the warm welcome. So I'll be talking to you about rights and 3D. I only have 15 minutes, so it won't be a heavy talk. I will give a couple of highlights of things that from our experience, we have felt are important to take into consideration in your 3D digitization workflow. So let's get started. The intention of this talk is, as Yolan was saying, to kind of demystify copyright. We always say it's complicated, but I hope you get out of this thinking it's manageable rather than it's complicated. I'm not even going to try to deal with this. And the second thing is that I'll be speaking from the perspective of what we believe in the data space of cultural heritage, which is encouraging and fostering availability and reusability of digital cultural heritage. So there's a couple of questions that you might need to answer if you are getting into this from a different perspective, but the perspective that I'll be bringing forward today is about fostering reuse. So there's a number of questions that we have identified as being relevant, things that we should all be thinking about. And I'm kind of oversimplifying this topic, but I think these are some highlights to start warming up into the various considerations around law, contract that are worth bringing into a 3D digitization process. So the first one is there copyright in the object that I'm going to digitize? And this is the question that you've been dealing with in 2D digitization efforts already, but it's still worth asking yourself whether there's copyright in the underlying object and finding ways to clear it. The second one that I want to briefly talk about is there copyright in the digital object that you generate? Are there rights around this, and who has them? The third one, and I'm thinking I might not have time to go into this one, but I still wanted to flag that it's an important question, is relating to all of this data that is generated as part of a 3D digitization workflow that people mentioned earlier, from photographs in photogrammetry to paradata to metadata. Is there any rights in there? Who can use it, etc.? And then the last one, which is something that is very important for Europeana, is where do right statements play a role in this? And I'll go into this in a moment. So again, I'll mostly be asking the questions. I'll give some hints on what the answer can go towards, but we're hoping to conduct some research specifically tailored to these questions and the data space for cultural heritage to be able to provide more concrete guidance. So today it's mostly about getting us thinking about this topic and again, demystifying it and making it easy and manageable for everyone. So the first question, is there copyright in the underlying object? Again, an old-time friend, you've already dealt with this question for 2D digitization, but it's still important to deal with it in 3D digitization because copyright determines the extent to which you can or cannot copy, disseminate, transform something. So it will have an impact in the objectives that you're trying to pursue. Therefore, it's worth still flagging this question. And the answer, I'm trying to answer it in a sentence. It's far from being as short as that, but there is copyright when there is human originality. So that's the only criteria that you should remember. Copyright is not about rewarding other things. It's only there to reward human creativity. So the criteria that the European Court of Justice has been unfolding for us around this notion of originality is it should be understood as it being the author's own intellectual creation. We don't have time to go into that in detail, but maybe there's like two things you should remember. It is that for there to be copyright, there needs to be a human creation. So anything stemming from nature, for example, cannot be subject to copyright protection. And for there to be copyright, the author needs to have been able to make creative choices throughout the process. So there needs to be a creative intention that the author can control. So for example, again, I'm thinking about the underlying object at this stage, not about the digital version. So if we look at the example on my left, your right, I think, there's a human creation, it's human made, there's a design, there was a creative intention. This is something that you can flag as there might be copyright in this. Maybe it has expired, I don't know, but that's kind of a human-made creation that has an author's imprint. Whereas on the other side, I don't know enough about the object, so I'm really just making assumptions to have something to use as an example, but this is an object that results from nature, maybe manipulated by a human, but for practical reasons, not for creative ones. So this is not subject to copyright protection. So that's a start. In your workflow, at the beginning of your project, you can already rule out the things that might present problems later on and maybe focus on things that are copyright-free. If you need to work on the things that are subject to copyright protection, there's a couple of measures you can put in place to try to make it the least problematic as possible. So if the object that you're intending to organize your digitization project around, or the objects, are subject to copyright protection or likely to be subject to copyright protection, the most easy way to address that is obtaining permission from the rights holder. Unfortunately, we all know that's not always possible. So there are various measures in our copyright system designed to support public interest activities like ours, so that we don't need to face too many challenges around copyright. And for me, this is my favorite part of copyright, is exceptions and limitations to copyright. So it's the thing that is within the system that is designed to safeguard public interest activities and other activities so that they don't become a problem kind of recognizing that copyright is relevant for certain purposes, but it cannot limit the possibility to conduct some things that are more important than an individual right. So copyright exceptions and limitations are situations recognized in all of our jurisdictions for concrete purposes by concrete people, where you can use in copyright material without the need to get permission. And I thought I would flag two examples. And again, this is something that is worth researching further, but two examples that are relevant in the case of 3D digitization. One of them is the copyright exceptions for preservation purposes. So according to this exception that is now mostly harmonized across the European Union, a cultural heritage institution can make copies of works in its collection without having to ask the rights holder for permission. So that's really, really good. And we're very lucky to have such a provision. In the case of 3D, we might be talking about immovable heritage, so not objects that are in a cultural heritage institution's permanent collection. So it's worth looking at other possibilities as well. So there's another exception that might be useful in this scenario, which is called the freedom of panorama exception. This is a provision that is different from member state to member state. It has not been fully harmonized in the EU, but it basically says that if an artwork, architectural, sculptural, and it might depend on your jurisdiction, is located in a public space, you can make reproductions, you can make communication to the public, you can disseminate it, you can transform it in certain jurisdictions without having to ask the rights holder for permission. Again, this changes from a country to another, so it's worth checking how far it goes in your situation. Maybe it just allows for the making of reproductions, which facilitates the digitization, but not the making available online. But remember that copyright exceptions are an ally in our activities. If the material is in the public domain, you're very lucky. You don't need to worry about that part of law or contract. So you don't need to worry about things from a copyright perspective. There's another element that it's worth flagging, and I will repeat what other people have said. I'm not an expert in 3D, but I hear a lot of 3D experts saying, but sometimes we need to access a site that is subject to private ownership. So beyond all of the copyright questions, when you try to digitize an object, you might also have to face elements ruled by other areas of law or contract established by whomever controls the site. And it's when agreeing on these conditions that you should be thinking forward into what is it that I will use this 3D item for, and therefore making sure that these conditions are well reflected in your contract. So we've talked about the underlying object, and let's now look at the other side of the coin, at whether there can be any rights, mostly from the copyright perspective, in the digital object in itself. So let's assume, and again, I'm making assumptions. I don't know the history behind this object. So let's assume that this exists in reality, and this is an exact replica or a very close to reality replica of this object. We've talked about the fact that such a building might now be in the public domain, so no need to worry about the copyright in the underlying object. But is there any right generated from the process or workflow established around the digitization effort? So again, we'll go back to the same criteria as in itself is original, which means it has to be an author's own intellectual creation. And here I didn't dare to share a lot of examples because that's exactly the question that I think we should research further. We need to come together to establish a couple of criteria that help us make such a determination. Depending on the digitization workflow for 3D, it will change a lot depending on the technology used, on the result, etc. So I'm not going to be super brave and I'm going to say, let's look into this further. But one thing, just for you to understand the extent to which this copyright might not exist or might exist in the digital object in itself. If we talk about a born digital object, so someone created the 3D model from scratch, there's a creative effort that is not based on anything that exists in reality. There will be a lot of creative choices made by whomever is creating that model. So it's relatively clear that there can be copyright in this digital object. However, whenever the intention is not to make a creative effort, but to be as close to reality as possible, this is where it becomes a lot trickier to argue that any new rights generate. And I think at this stage, it's important to remind ourselves that copyright is not there to reward time and money or skill or the amount of people that were involved or the beauty of the result. So there can be someone with no time and money, no skill, all alone doing something that we find really ugly, and the result might still be subject to copyright. The only criteria to determine whether something is subject to copyright or not is originality. So sometimes it feels a little bit stretched to bring copyright into this conversation. It doesn't sound like it's designed for that purpose, and I would agree. There's another level of rights within our copyright systems, which are called neighboring rights. So it's a kind of a sister type of protection for copyright that has a lower duration and a lower amount of rights. It was designed to reward. So I just said that copyright does not reward time and money, skill, effort, etc. These neighboring rights were designed to reward effort and skill. And there are some neighboring rights recognized for non-original photography in some member states. I don't have time to go into this, but if anyone is interested in discussing this further, there has been a copyright directive establishing that these neighboring rights should not be claimed on reproductions of public domain works of visual art. So we should, again, I think the general message is don't meddle copyright into this. Copyright is the problem that we deal with when clearing rights. Let's not bring it up into this other level. Another thing to take into consideration at the level of digitization is making sure you obtain the rights if you need to. When you're commissioning someone else to conduct the digitization effort. You might not need to, but it's worth paying attention to this. If the digitization is done within your organization, generally copyright legislation in the EU recognizes this idea of work for hire. So if you've been hired to conduct this type of work, the rights are automatically transferred to the employer. I'm going to skip the questions around metadata, paradata, and other things. And if you're interested, we can go into this later. The last thing that I want to bring your attention to are right statements. My other favorite thing, beyond exceptions and limitations. So, which is kind of a right statement is a simplified tool that expresses the conditions for reuse. In the context of Europeana and our licensing framework, we rely on Creative Commons licenses, Creative Commons tools, and 6 out of the 12 right statements by the Right Statements Consortium. For now, this might be revisited if we believe that we need to be able to express additional things. The beauty of this is that you're telling the outside world, I went through all of this hassle to make sense of all of this copyright complexity to give you very specific and simplified information so that you don't need to worry about this. And this is particularly important in a cross-border context like ours. So I would continue to encourage thinking about how to translate the reuse conditions into a simplified right statement. Definitely, if you work with Europeana, that's a necessary step. And this line that divides things might seem a bit random, but it is not. So on one side, it's the right statements that you should use if you have made a determination that the object is in copyright. And on the other side is the things you should use if you have made a determination that it is in the public domain. That kind of means that if it's in the public domain, you should not be using a CC BY non-derivative license, for example. If your worry is to ensure attribution or to ensure that there's some compensation, these are very relevant criteria, but let's not make it dependent on copyright. Let's find other solutions like terms and conditions, etc. That would be my recommendation. So when choosing a right statement for 3D, again, correctly identify whether there is copyright or not, acknowledge the public domain status if that is the case, and the most important thing is to have clarity on your institutional policy. That's the thing that should make you, should help you make a clear determination in line with your objectives. So remember that even if there might be rights in one of the two or the two levels, you don't need to claim them. You can waive them depending on the objective that you pursue within your organization. I know this might sound controversial for some people, and I'm really willing to talk this through and look for solutions that don't mislead the end user. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ariadna. I feel like we should have a webinar of a few more hours to explain all of this. I think for sure you've achieved being able to demystify copyright at least a little bit when it comes to the object for sure. To demystify a bit further, I think it would be nice to put this in practice or see how this works in practice as well. So if all is well, we should have Kate Fernie and Antonella Fresa online who will talk to us about some specific use cases where they looked at copyright in their own 3D digitization efforts. We'll start with Kate, who is operations manager at Carrare. And Kate, if we can get you on screen, that would be great.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Antonella.
Hi.
Nice to see you. And can we get Kate as well? Please bear with us for a second. A hybrid meeting is always sometimes technically challenging to achieve. So Kate and Antonella will look at this from two different perspectives. Antonella will talk to us when it comes to the copyright of a specific object, so in a cultural heritage institution taken off the shelf and 3D digitized, while Kate is looking, she works at Carrare from the archaeological perspective. She'll be looking at actual sites and monuments and how copyright is applied and processed there. Lovely. Now we have you both. Kate, very happy to see you. Please feel free to start your presentation. I will have to ask you to stick to your 4 minutes. I know it's a lot to ask, but we're looking forward to your presentation. Kate, the floor is yours.
I'm very happy to be here. I can't actually see my slides at the moment, but okay, so it seems as if everyone can hear me. So thank you for confirming. I wanted to speak about the rights in the underlying material, and I'm using an example of the St. Laurentius Church in Inami. Today, this is the parish church in the community of Inami. It's, I assume, in the ownership of the church, so it's not a public institution, although it's regularly visited by the public. It was built around 1000 AD. And over its lifespan, it's seen many different additions and refurbishments. The tower, for example, is a later addition, although the basic ground plan of the church has stayed unchanged through its lifetime. In the 1990s, there were signs of cracks in the fabric of the church, and so a restoration project was planned. This involved a complete excavation of the interior of the church, and it allowed the archaeologists and the buildings historians who were involved to understand more about the history of the church and how it had built up over its lifespan. Here I'm showing a photograph of the church as it was in 2011. And if you get the chance to go to Inami, visit it today. Visual Dimension BVMA were involved or have been involved in a long-running collaboration with the community in Inami and the archaeological museum there. And they created this virtual reconstruction. I'm sorry. They created a series of virtual reconstructions of the church. This one is around 1015 AD. The reconstruction is based on a lot of information. So it's based on a full survey of the fabric, photogrammetry of the fabric of the current building, the information from excavations of the ground plan, but also studies of historical archives for the area. So you can see that there's various underlying material involved and various different rights that are there. My second example is an HBIM model which has been produced of the seat of the Irish Parliament, which is at Leinster House in Dublin. It's a very detailed model. It's based on laser scan survey, aerial, airborne LiDAR, photogrammetry, a detailed analysis of the plans and drawings, looking detailed studies of the interior. And the model itself is something where the data's been phased, it's segmented so that you can look at different components within the building. It's an intelligent model which is linked to additional information, full documentation of the structure itself. This is something, again, where there are rights involved in terms of the creation of the model that you're seeing. And in fact, in the case of this model, the access is restricted because of the security issues around Parliament buildings, but there is access to the information that's available. I wanted to, my final slide is just to conclude by saying that historic buildings are complicated things. They generally have multiple building phases. Sometimes these are recent. You can get modern additions by current living architects to historic buildings. There's a lot of documentation which is available, and these are all important, both for virtual reconstructions and also for having a detailed understanding when you're creating a model of that building. There are a series of choices that are being made by the authors of these models, and there is intellectual property in those choices. But the existence of copyright doesn't mean that the content cannot be accessible and usable. Permissions can be granted. I'm not sure if I kept to time, but I'd like to hand over to Antonella now for her case study.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I will start with just a little bit of considerations that we are addressing during our 3D digitization. As mentioned in the chat earlier, I am talking about the experience that we are gathering during the Eureka 3D project and the previous projects we were attending with the Photo Consortium. Heritage belongs to citizens, but it is managed and preserved by organizations that are public and private. And this is what was mentioned by Ariadna just a minute ago. The material in the public domain and the historical items are in the hands of some authority who make decisions if to digitize, what to digitize, how to digitize, and what to share online. Because from the ownership of the heritage to the accessibility online, there is some way to be done. Then there are budget limitations. So the decision is not only the willingness, it's also the availability of budget. And 3D digitization is currently more expensive than 2D digitization. Then there are national laws. And we heard from Ariadna that they are not yet harmonized in everything that regards IP. And finally, everybody can decide if and what to make available online, for which purpose. So next, please. So there are a lot of decisions that have to be considered at the beginning of the digitization. Next, please. Thank you. The first case that I would like to tell you is the case of the Lambusa boat from Cyprus. This is a digitization that is currently ongoing in the frame of the Eureka 3D project. The fishing boat built in 1955 is an historical monument belonging to the Cyprus culture. It is property of the Limassol municipality, and it's a public attraction. It has been docked for several years, and it has suffered of being eaten away by sea salt and weather conditions. Now it was restored with the help of EC projects, and the digitization is ongoing. Next, please. These are pictures of the boat. Next, please. What happened? That in order to progress with the digitization and the publication of the results of the digitization in Europeana, the consent to the municipality of Limassol has been requested. This agreement is used for this case. So we are available to provide the model that has been developed by Cyprus University of Technology and Limassol municipality. Next, please. The second case that I wanted to tell you is the case of the daguerreotypes from Girona. The daguerreotypes are first examples of photography dating back in 1830, and it is by definition in the public domain as copyright expired. The collection is one of the best collection preserved at the CRDI unit of the municipality of Girona. And as a public body, CRDI is subject to the laws on the reuse of public heritage. And when there are no legal obstacles, it is mandatory for CRDI to make the results of the digitization accessible online. The 2D was already digitized. Now the 3D has been digitized in the frame of a previous project. And the 3D content have been digitized through a public tender. A public tender launched by the municipality of Girona to recruit the technical partner that has carried out the digitization. Next, please. These are examples of the daguerreotypes that are in Europeana, and a good portion of them have been digitized in 3D and are accessible as 3D contents in Europeana. Next, please. What happened in this case? That differently from other countries, in Spain, the reproduction does not generate new additional rights. But as we heard from Ariadna, this is not the same all over Europe. And the 3D collection in Europeana was labeled as a public domain. But this has been possible because of the rules, the law in Spain. However, there are derivative works, because in the case of CRDI wants to use these 3D daguerreotypes to create new resources, such as interactive immersive application, video games, and in this case, new rights arise. We heard from the speech of Ariadna that this was a delicate point to be addressed. And in fact, now we have CRDI has to negotiate with the technical provider, La Tempesta, who is also in this conference. I have seen the name in the chat, to negotiate which kind of rights to apply.
Antonella, I don't know if you can hear me. If you, you can.
Finish. Thank you.
Perfect.
Yes, now I hear you. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Antonella and Kate. I hope you can hear me currently. I'm afraid we don't have time for questions technically. I think this will be difficult as well. But if there are questions that you see online and in the chat, it would be lovely if you could address them online. Let's give one last lovely hand to Kate, Antonella, and Ariadna for their contribution. Thank you. So in these use cases, we saw some interesting points. We saw that Kate talked about how even if we are digitizing a monument which might be in the public domain and have free access due to freedom of panorama, there might be extra copyright that is created in the digitization process by the people that are actually creating this 3D reconstruction of, for instance, former versions of the church that Kate gave as an example. And with Antonella, she very much focused on the need for clear contracts, for instance, in the first example that she gave, to allow for free reuse of the objects that are digitized, maybe by a third party or by an external partner. And in her second example, I think an interesting point was where she mentioned that her organization, and sometimes by public law, you are required to give free reuse and free access of the objects that you digitize. So interesting things to keep in mind for sure. I'm afraid we'll have to go on to the next session, but thank you, Ariadna, for joining us.